Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Andrew.
And I'm Rachel.
And we are Picture the Scene podcast, brought to you by Aura Studios. We are a true crime podcast aiming to put you, the listener, at the scene of the crime. We bring you a new episode on a weekly basis, mainly focusing on lesser known crimes from the UK and Ireland. However, at times we expand into cases from anywhere in the world and all ones that are well known. And as we are a true crime podcast, listener caution is always advised. And today there is no exception, so please be aware. If you like what you hear, please do follow us on whatever social media platform you prefer, subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform of choice, and if you have the capability, give us a rating and review as well. It does mean the world to us, doesn't it, Rach?
We love those ratings.
We do indeed.
Yeah, no, we love reviews, we love ratings, we love it when we get new subscribers. We especially love Patreon subscribers too. We just are really enthused and driven and motivated by everyone who comes back and listens and supports our pod. So thank you.
Yes, thank you indeed. If you like us that much that you want to support us, you can do so for less than the price of a cup of tea or coffee on Patreon. Our lowest tier starts at just £1 a month. We release bonus content every month. The links to our social medias and Patreon can be found in the show notes, or visit patreon.com/scenepod. That's patreon.com/SCENEPOD. And Rachel, we have a new patron, Debbie Richards. Welcome, Debbie, to the family.
Patreon Klaxon. Welcome, yes. Debbie.
Woohoo. Welcome. You always appreciate when new people join. We hope you enjoying the extra bonus content over on Patreon, and as always, our DMs are open for you to slide into if you have any questions or comments.
Yeah, or any case suggestions as well. We love hearing on those too.
Exactly. We do, where possible, now release our episodes a week early for our Patreon supporters. So you don't need an infinity stone to time travel. You just have to simply support us on Patreon. So, Rach, how have you been since we last spoke? Are you excited for what's happening next week?
Why? What's happening next week?
You're going on holiday.
Oh, yes. Sorry. I thought you meant something else. Yes, I'm very excited. I actually leave today. Woo! So, yeah, all good this way. How about you, Andrew?
Yeah, well, I'm not going on holiday, but yes, I'm excited. Rachel didn't invite me, people. Isn't that shocking?
I'm sorry.
It's disgusting. Like, she chose to take her husband over me and her daughter.
And child. Yeah,
and her daughter.
I'm sorry. Although I kind of feel like explaining why you'd be there I'd be apologising profusely to Lee, so...
Yeah,
I'm in a lose-lose situation, really.
It'd be pretty weird, wouldn't it? So, Rachel, more importantly, are you ready for some true crime?
I was born ready, Andrew.
Now, this episode is the last in season 2, which means we're going to take a quick 1 week break, and we only take 1 week break a year, so you can't knock us for that. As Rachel just said, she's off on holiday, and I'm starting a new football manager save with Cheshunt, who are in the Vanarama League South. So I'm myself probably not going to be moving from the sofa much.
Fun facts.
Yes, fun facts indeed. And today I want to bring you a slightly different format of episode, one which I hope everyone will find as interesting as I did researching it. So as a podcast, the majority of our cases are in the UK, and despite London being by far the biggest city in the UK, we don't often go there, do we, Rachel?
We don't, actually. That's a bit odd, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I think we've done a couple of cases in and around London. But, interestingly, you'd think with it being, like, the biggest city, that they'd be, like, heavily populated around there, but no.
Yeah, no, I realised that. So I thought, I'm going to try and correct that a little bit, just for the end of the season, sorry. So I'm going to cover...
Balance things out?
Yes, I'm going to cover a whole year of homicide in London.
Oh, wow.
And that year I picked is 2000.
How long have we got today?
We've got about 5 hours. So you're not going on holidays. I've done this on purpose, people, so Rachel misses a flight. But yeah, the year I've picked is 2018. Now, I picked that year because it's recent enough, but it's not too recent that some of the cases would have had a conclusion.
Yeah, good point. And I guess as well, like, it's like sometimes when you look at like the late 2000s era, like in the last couple of years, it can be really tricky, can't it? Because cases are either they've been to court and they're maybe being like sentencing's being contested, or there's potential like for retrial and things like that. It's always like tricky ground, isn't it? It's so close. But then I also love doing the more recent cases because I feel like we have more information on them.
Yeah.
More stuff readily available to research.
Yeah, it is. It's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I picked the term, you may have noticed that I used the term homicide. And some of you might be thinking, well, that's quite an American term. But I picked the term homicide because it means killing of a person by another. Because if I had just picked murder, then it discounts the likes of manslaughter and similar charges. So homicide actually just means the killing of another, not a particular type of crime.
And I absolutely love America, and I it's a nod to our American listeners as well, isn't it?
It is indeed. It is indeed. And I always think about, we had a comment when we very first started, where you said you love America, and someone commented saying they love the UK, so you can swap with them. And I always keep that in mind because I was always so happy that someone left us a comment. So if that person's still listening, thank you, and drop us another comment. But
yeah, don't you find it fascinating? Sorry, we will get into it in a minute, but don't you find it fascinating when somebody else is like obsessed with where you live, and you're like, oh, I'd do anything to like live in the States. Curse the green card system. But yeah, like, and then somebody else would be like, oh no, I'd love to live where you are, and I'm like, let's just swap. Let's actually just swap lives. Let's see how it looks. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's anyone want to swap with me? Then I've got a very needy dog. But so it's also worth noting here, Rachel, that the Met Police, the Metropolitan Police, which is the London Police, counts the date of a homicide for their status as being the 24 hours in which the crime is reported to or coming to the attention of the police. So sometimes it's not actually when it was committed.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
I did not know that either. I love it when you bring fun facts.
Yeah, not so fun, but yeah. And so all we know, in London, there was 137 victims of homicide in 2018 reported. And from what I can gather, as this figure was a little bit harder to get because I had to actually count them manually, there was 132 actual homicides committed in 2018. So 137 reported and 132 actually committed. But I did count those, so my count may be a little bit off there. So after the 130, a few little stats here for you before we get started.
Love a bit of data.
Yeah, so from the 137 homicide victims, 104 were male and 33 female. 28 were classified as a result of domestic abuse and 109 not. Now, by far the largest method of killed by was by knife or sharp implement, standing at 82, with the second largest being shooting at 15. However, there was such a wide variety of method used, such as well as knife and guns, there were crossbows, baseball bats, heavy objects, strangulations, beatings with feet or fists, fire, car. There were so many different ways that people were killed.
Lovely.
Yeah.
That's really like broad range.
Yes. 58 of the homicide victims were black, 57 whites, 19 Asian, and 3 either other or not known. Now, there were all ages of victims, 5 of them being under 12, with the youngest just 11 weeks old, and 14 being over 65, with the oldest being 89 years old. So wide spectrum then. If you're wondering which borough in London has the most, Greenwich saw the largest number of homicide victims with 17 recorded.
Oh wow. And is like the population of Greenwich like quite confined, like large?
I don't know, to be honest. We've covered a case from Greenwich before. But,
yeah.
I don't know. But what about some of the stats for people who have been proceeded against for homicide offences in 2018? So, the term proceeded against is used by the police and it's what they use for statistics. So what they define it as is a person who had charges brought against them. So the accused basically, and the date is recorded as when they've been charged, not when the crime took place. So again, this might not be in the actual year. Okay. The people may or may not be found guilty, so they don't record that. They've been charged, so the CPA, the Crown Prosecution Service, deemed there to be sufficient guilt to find them guilty. So that's what they count people proceeded against. So it doesn't mean they've always been found guilty. So in 2018, 232 people were charged with homicide-related crime. So of those 232, 212 were men and 20 women. The stats around which race the people being proceeded against were self-reported. So what people classified themselves as, but 115 were black, 69 white, 18 Asian, 15 mixed race, with either 15 not recorded, other, or declined to answer. Now, all ages were proceeded against, with 4 falling under 14, with the youngest being 10 years old, and 6 being 65 or older, with the oldest being 78 years old.
Wow.
So within the London boroughs, unsurprisingly, since in my last stat, Greenwich saw the largest number of people proceeded against, with 17 recorded. So if you're a tourist, maybe give Greenwich a swerve.
Yeah, I definitely would be swerving Greenwich, especially late at night.
I'm sure it's a lovely area, though. Don't.
Oh, it is. Angrily. It's beautiful. It is beautiful. I definitely don't want to anger anyone, but the stats don't lie. But what I will say as well is, and like data can tell like many different stories, and like what we don't have for context there is, like the population of the area of Greenwich, which could be abnormally high in comparison to the other boroughs of London, when so likelihood is that the percentage of crime is going to be higher because the percentage of people living in the area is higher. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's also like socioeconomic status and things like that as well, isn't it? So
absolutely. There's so many different things that you could look at. It is really interesting to call out these statistics, though. Especially like looking holistically over a year and looking at different buckets. Interesting how when they're capturing some of, certainly when you were going through the race like part, there was a could not identify, and I'm like, wow, gosh, that crime must have been so bad, like in terms of the body that was discovered, for them not to be able to determine the race of the victim. Like, that's just a bit nuts. And then on the flip side, when the criminals are coming in and being booked, or all of that data is being collected, people that would prefer not to say, like, or give information like that. So I'm always curious about, like, but because I noticed that you'd said that there was a certain percentage that failed to disclose their race, for instance.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. You're right. It's just a few facts and figures, though, Rach, to help give some context, because we are all about cases on this show, so don't worry, people. I am going to get into some cases, but I can't obviously go into full detail or even brief detail on every homicide in 2018, 137. It'd be a little bit too long, the episode.
Well, some of us have a flight to catch.
We do, but I did want to go over some, just to put some human faces to those stats. So some of these may have more details than others. I haven't cherry-picked these. I just picked these at random. But I am going to totally contradict myself now by saying that the very first one I did cherry-pick. Because it was the very first recorded homicide in London of 2018. So I wanted to start with the very first one recorded. That's the only reason why I picked it.
Okay, cool.
So I
love your honesty. No one would have known.
No one would have known, no. And I'm reading these out also, the cases in date order, just because my OCD made me do it. The very first one is a Steve Navarez Jara. He was a 20-year-old piloting and engineering student who was attending a New Year's Eve party in Bartholomew Court on the Red Brick Estate, which is in Islington. Now, also attending, so this was actually on the 31st of
Yeah.
December. But the crime committed on the 1st. So also attending the party was 4 friends who went together. Daniel Lenner, who is known under the pseudonym Unknown T, and apparently he's quite a famous rapper. I haven't heard of him, but he's even appeared with Drake at the O2 Arena.
I haven't heard of him either, but that doesn't say a lot.
Yes. I know Drake's famous. There was also with Daniel was Rami Borland, Mohammed Musa, and Israel Ogunsika. Now, at some point, just after 3 a.m., so we are on the 1st of January now, Mohammed Musa, he began to grab girls. He was physically touching them, including slapping them on their bottoms, and he also, as well as the women, he was generally annoying people as well. So, as such, a mass fight began because of this, with guests grabbing knives, bottles, planks of wood, and one person even had a machete.
Oh my God, at a New Year's Eve party?
Yes.
What is... What... You know, when you hear of these crimes, sorry, I promise I won't comment on every single case, but you know, when you hear of these crimes, you're like, why were you walking around with that? Like, why did you even have that on your being? Yeah. Like, it just, to me, and New Year's Eve as well signifies like the start of a new year. You say goodbye to your son or your daughter to head off to a New Year's Eve party. You expect to have them home, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. Someone snuck it into the party, apparently. I don't know why. So Steve was a participant in the fight, and at one point he was actually trading punches with Musa. Steve fell to the floor, and as soon as he fell to the floor, several people proceeded to punch him, kick him, hit him with wood. He was hit with that machete once, which is why they knew it was a machete there. He was stabbed twice in the chest and once in the arm, and he died at the scene at 3:30 a.m.
Wow. Gosh.
Now, Daniel Lenner, who was a rapper Unknown T, he would actually be found not guilty of murder or violent disorder. Mohammed Musa would be found not guilty of manslaughter, but guilty of violent disorder, and he was sentenced to 2 years, with the full term being suspended. He was ordered to complete 250 hours of unpaid work, 22 days of program requirement, and 10 days of rehabilitation. Ramini Borland would be found guilty of manslaughter and violent disorder, and he would be sentenced in total to 10 years. And Israel Ogunsika, he would never be brought to trial because he was killed in a street fight. He was stabbed to death in April of 2018.
Oh, wow.
So that's the first case. So straight start of the new year, and it's a knife crime in London, which is what is in the headlines all the time. And even one of the perpetrators, a few months later, got killed himself in a knife fight. Great start to the year.
Yeah. I'm not sure, like, what company the house party was kind of keeping and whether Stephen was in with the wrong crowds. Like, for context, whether, you know, this gang had turned up uninvited or...
No, they weren't uninvited.
Yeah, but basically had their paths ever crossed with Stephen before, you know?
No, they didn't know him.
Yeah, so like, I wonder what his mindset was going to the party that night, obviously assuming he would make it home, whether he was thinking, oh, you know, might be a bit choice, you know, a couple of people that I don't get along with, but I'll just keep my head down and crack on, or whether, you know, he considered himself one of the lads. I don't know.
Maybe.
And for context, like, you know, we don't have the answers to that, but I am always curious when you're in company with people like that. Are you aware? Like, are you conscious of that, or are you oblivious to it?
Exactly, yeah. No, that's a good point, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, Rachel.
Okay.
Our next case is Vijay Patel. He was a 49-year-old small business owner. He owned a shop in Mill Hill in London. He was married and a father of 2. Everyone who came into contact with him, either in his shop or that he knew personally, would describe him as a good guy, with his personality being described as good, natured and kind. Now, on the Saturday evening, the 6th of January 2018, he was working in the shop, as he usually was, when 3 boys entered his shop. 2 were 16 and 1 was 15, and they wanted to buy some Rizla. So, Rizla are cigarette rolling papers for those outside of the UK, and you have to be 18 to buy them. So another shop worker, not VJ, asked if any of them had any ID to prove their age. With none of them could produce any ID, they became verbally abusive towards the staff and they were ushered out of the shop. When they got outside of the shop, and we know this because the shop had CCTV outside of it, the three teenagers continued to act aggressively. By now, VJ was also outside, but he wasn't participating, he wasn't being aggressive, he was simply stood observing with his hands in his cardigan pockets. All of a sudden, one of the teenage boys, one of the 16-year-olds, lunged at VJ while his hands were still in his pockets, and he hit him in the lower jaw with his right forearm, forcing him to fall backwards and hit his head. Now, as the shop worker chased the boys off with a shop sign, they were seen laughing and joking about what happened. They were showing off that they made him fall over and hit his head. Now, an ambulance was called for VJ, but he died the next day in hospital on January the 7th. Now, all three boys...
So one blow?
Yeah, one blow, because it's the blow on the back of his head, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
And it wasn't even a punch, because he kind of hit him with his forearm, but yeah.
Yeah.
Now, all three boys were eventually identified via the CCTV, and they were arrested. But only one of the 16-year-old boys, the one who had actually lunged at VJ, would be charged, and he was taken to trial on manslaughter charges. He pled not guilty, claiming self-defense, which ultimately wasn't successful because they had the CCTV, and he was found guilty and sentenced to 4 years in prison.
4 years?
Yeah, so 2 years and out. Well, 4 years in prison and 3 years on licence afterwards.
He's taken someone's father, husband, brother, son, and, goodness knows, like, how many friends, and probably a massive help to his local community. He's just protecting his shop and making sure that these kids move on. Probably goes to work every day, not thinking about the consequences of things like that or the risk he puts himself at. And one blow and it's all gone. And the kid gets 2 years.
Exactly. And he was literally just stood watching what was happening, probably to make sure he didn't escalate, but yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah. And, like, things like that do happen, don't they? Like, this is still my premises right outside this immediate shop, and I don't want you threatening any customers that are going to come in and say, hey, can you go buy me some Rizzlers? These guys won't sell them to me. Yeah. Let's be honest, we've all been 16 lurking for something outside a corner shop, like booze or whatever. Yeah. So he's just being mindful, isn't he? Exactly. As anybody would be. So that's heartbreaking. Really tragic.
It is. Luckily, I never needed anyone to buy me my toffee crisps. But so now let's skip forward a few days to the 11th of January, and let's meet Harry Uzoka. Harry was 25 years old. He was a model, and he was signed with London's premier model management agency. So he worked regularly, and he had some famous friends. And now he wasn't just one of those people that call themselves a model because they post a few photographs on Instagram, but they're not really. He actually was a proper model.
Like a fully bona fide model.
Harry was friends with another model, George Cole, but the friendship turned sour after George claimed and told other people that he'd slept with Harry's girlfriend, Ruby Campbell.
Naughty.
The pair would exchange some heated text messages before George would text Harry saying that he'll come so they can fight and settle the dispute. George also told Harry to bring some friends, so Harry just simply replied with a message, "Come Shepherd's Bush." Harry lived, obviously, in Shepherd's Bush with Adrian Harper, and Cole took two of his friends, Mercer DeCander and Jonathan Okibo, in a minicab to Shepherd's Bush. George and Jonathan had knives on them. George had at least 2 knives on him, and Merce had a machete. What is this?
God!
What is this with machetes?
Like, you come for a fight as well.
Yeah.
But why? I mean, they're models as well. Are they both models?
Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, shouldn't be fighting because the face. But like, if you're gonna come for a fight, like. If you're going to come for a fight, like fists, that's all, like, why these people feel the need to, like, is it threatening behavior, having a knife on you? Maybe, maybe it's, oh, I'm going to take it because I want him to feel threatened. But like, then that split second when you decide to use it changes everyone's life. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Oh, awful.
Now, Adrian, Harry's housemate, he would admit, both him and Harry would have metal bars in them, from the dumbbells. They'd have those metal bars in them. They would just had them because they were expecting to be outnumbered, but he said they were also expecting a fist fight.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, I think in a fist fight you would expect that you might grapple for something around you, like, and not saying that I condone this kind of fighting either, but just some like heavy objects that you can hit people with again. But like, a stabbing is so much more intentional than finding something that you can hit somebody with and cause some bruising. Do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah. Now, Harry actually was still expecting a fist fight, so while he was with Adrian actually stayed a little bit behind because of Harry's request, and Harry went to meet George, and a fight did take place. However, it was more like an ambush with George and his friends, with George eventually stabbing Harry in the heart.
Oh, wow.
Harry managed to stagger back to Adrian and tell him he'd been stabbed before collapsing. Now, CCTV again would capture them chasing Harry and attacking him. I watched the CCTV. They even captured them just like afterwards, wiping the blood from the knife and walking off. But yeah, it wasn't nice.
And a stabbing in the heart, that general area, that is again intent to kill. That's not, that's not self-defense, and that's also not, I want to warn him, so I'm going to stab him in the leg or something. That is pure hatred for him, isn't it? Poor Harry.
Yeah, because the CCTV showed them chasing him and him running off and trying to get away, and then it showed two of them stopping chasing because George carried on and caught him.
Yeah.
But so George, Harry and Jonathan would all be charged with murder. George would admit to having two knives on him, but he would claim that Harry was the aggressor. And all three of them would plead not guilty to murder. George would be found guilty of murder and receive a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years.
Wow.
Yep. Merce.
First decent sentence here.
Yeah, exactly. Merce would be found guilty of murder and receive life with a minimum term of 22 years.
Wow.
And Jonathan would be found not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter, and he would be given a 14-year sentence.
Gosh, really made an example of those three lads, eh?
Yeah. So our next person to look at is Syed Khan. Syed was a 49-year-old father of 7, and he worked at the A to Z furniture and carpet store in Ilford. Syed also worked with an Imran Mohammed, who was 31 at the time. Now, Imran had previous convictions for dishonesty. He was at the time an overstayer in the UK, his visa having expired, so he was there illegally, and Syed suspected him of stealing from the store. On the 24th of January, to avoid getting caught for stealing and potentially being deported, Imran attacked Syed with an axe, hitting him 12 times in the head, splitting his head open. He then used a shopping trolley, this was very late at night, to transport the body to a local cemetery, and that is where the body and murder weapon was found 7 days later. Mohammed,
Wow.
Yeah, I know, wow, hitting the head was...
No, there's a sense again of calmness, premeditation. Sometimes when we're diving into the bigger cases and the story's building up, it doesn't seem so... I mean, the crime still seems pointless or preventable, but it doesn't seem so such an inconvenience, kill him, get it over with, hide the body. These are just seem so awful because pointless.
Now, Mohammed would be charged with murder, but he would plead not guilty, claiming that it was self-defense, as Syed owed him money, and Syed also kept making sexual advances towards him.
Oh wow!
That's what he claimed anyway.
And that's the other thing as well. Really bothers me. I mean, obviously, I don't know the truth in this particular case. But when people try and tarnish the dead, you know, the victim here, his family are suffering massively. And then you go and throw in that he was like, you know, sexually assaulting you, or it was a pest, or, you know, had come onto you and you denied him. And like, just to throw that in there, just to add further like complexity, it's just so cruel, isn't it?
You've got to remember, he wasn't the owner of the shop. He wasn't wealthy. He was a shop worker he was a father of 7. No, like completely normal person.
He had a livelihood. Yeah, exactly. This man's just not. He's only thinking of himself by, you know, trying to defend his actions. He's taken the life of someone. It's just
exactly. It would come out in the trial that he had attempted to cover his tracks by painting the walls in the shop and by cleaning up the bloodstains.
Oh, wow.
And 4 days prior to the attack, he had been Googling how to kill a man with a hammer and how to kill a man with a punch.
Oh, wow. Okay, right.
After he had
really nasty piece of work.
Yeah, exactly. After he had disposed of the body and tried to cover up the evidence, he actually called the police, claiming to have been robbed and injured by a stranger, so he could cover up why he had injuries on him. He would be found guilty of murder, unsurprisingly, and he was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 24 years, and after which he would be deported back to Pakistan. Judge Molyneux would, at a sentencing, call the murder premeditated, and he would have to say this: "You are a liar, a manipulator, and a thief, and had once again been suspected of stealing. You attacked him savagely and brutally with the axe. You hit him to the head 12 times. The force was so great that you fractured his skull. The injury to the back of his hand shows he tried to defend himself, but he never stood a chance against you." So I think the judge saw through exactly what he had done, which is why he got a long sentence.
Good, definitely. And justice for the family as well.
Exactly. So let's skip forward now a little bit to February. It's the 9th of February. And let me introduce you to Hannah Leonard. Hannah was 55. She suffered from Huntington's disease. And on the 9th of February, she'd been drinking in a pub local to her, the Sir Colin Campbell pub. While they were not friends, she had been drinking in the pub with Lucy Casey, who was 44, and James Whittaker, who was 29. At some point during the drinking session, they all had an argument and the police were called. They settled their differences, though, and then when they settled the differences, they went and bought some fried chicken before taking a cab back to Hannah's flat. CCTV would show them all entering the flat, and CCTV would also show Lucy and James leaving the flat 3 hours later. At some point during those 3 hours, Hannah was stabbed 40 times in the legs, stomach, face and neck, and also, in addition to that, her head was stamped on.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Both would be arrested and charged with murder, but both would plead not guilty, blaming the other one. James would claim that he hid in the toilet while Lucy killed Hannah, and Lucy would claim that she was asleep and she woke up to find James standing over Hannah's body. So during the trial, evidence would show them entering and leaving the flat. A kitchen knife at the scene would have both Hannah's and Lucy's DNA on it. By DNA I mean blood, not just having held it. The CCTV would show Lucy wearing Hannah's coat and carrying her handbag when she left the flat. And Lucy's ID was found in the flat in her jacket, which she left behind. Lucy's shoes would be found to have, remember, because someone stamped on Lucy's head on Hannah's head several times. Lucy's shoes would be found to have minute traces of blood on them, and a footprint on Hannah's head matched Lucy's shoe. James's footprint would be found in the blood at the scene, but no other forensic evidence would be found related to him. So James would be found not guilty of all charges, and Lucy would be found guilty of murder and sentenced to life with a minimum term of 22 years. And these people, they didn't even know her before they met her in the pub that first time.
No, and again, like, what a decent sentence. Like, I find it really difficult to, like, comment on, you know, what somebody should get when they've taken the life of another person. And I feel like there is such a thing as a too low sentence, obviously. And what I mean by that is when you're talking about like single digit years and not really taking a massive amount of the person that's guilty, not really taking a massive amount of their life away from them when they've taken someone else's life. Like, exactly. But it's just like a moment in time, isn't it? But when we're talking like, 15 plus years, that's a long stretch, right? Yes. And obviously, like a lot of places in the UK, it's half for good behaviour, isn't it? But
no, not on life. On life, it's a minimum term.
Oh, is it? Right, yeah. Okay. But still, when you're looking at those sentences that are over 15 years, it feels like that's at least a decade of your life, which is always significant. And then some, like, there's obviously a good amount of time there for the family to grieve and feel, like, safe and that justice has been done as well, so...
Exactly. And even if you think about that last case with VJ, or last couple of cases back, where the boy got 4 years of manslaughter, so he would be out in 2 with 3 years on licence. I didn't mention it, but because I didn't want to go into too much detail on all the cases, but like he, for example, he already had a curfew on him, which he was breaking by being out because he had several violent incidents in the past, including attacking a teacher and punching a teacher. So when you put that into context,
was any of that taken into consideration in his sentencing?
No.
And that's the injustice that's done here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the argument should be he should not have been out that night, and therefore
he was breaking technically breaking the law being out that night, and he'll be out. He'll be out before he's when he's 18, and he'll be off his license when he's 21. Now, our next case is Bulent Cabela, who was 41 and a father of 3 on the 12th of February. He was a taxi driver and he was working at the time when his taxi was hit by a van, so he stopped to get out and talk to the van driver. When he got out, he was shot by the van driver a number of times in the head and chest. He died immediately at the scene, and his death was the first gunshot death of 2018 in London. Police investigations would show that his taxi was followed intentionally by the van. It was hit intentionally by the van, and they believe he was targeted and that it was a contract killing, but they don't know why.
My God.
Yeah, the van had false plates in it, and it was found 2 days later abandoned.
Did they ever find the killer?
Well, 4 men were originally arrested on a suspicion of murder, but they were released without charge, and Bulent's murder remains unsolved to this day.
How tragic, and like so many unanswered questions, like what had been so bad that somebody had to take a contract out to take him? Like, gosh, his family can't rest easy on that. Like, it's bad enough to lose a loved one, but to not have any resolution must just be the worst, like torture.
And definitely intentional. The van followed him for a couple of miles.
Yeah.
And so none of this was like, road rage or anything like that. It was, they might have wanted it to look like road rage, but it was intentional.
Wow.
So let's move forward, shall we, to Twickenham and to the 5th of March. On this day, Laura Figueroa, who was 47, she was a married mother of 2 boys, would be found dead in her home with 60 stab wounds to her body and also defensive wounds to her hands, showing that she had fought back against her attacker. Later that day, her husband, Adelino, and their 2 sons, Claudio and Joaquin, would be found dead at the bottom of a cliff. Sedatives would be found in both of the children and Laura. For reasons unknown, it is believed her husband drugged her and the kids before stabbing her to death and then taking the kids to the cliff. Witnesses would say they saw him leading the two very tired children towards the cliff.
Oh my God.
Yes. Forensic pathologist Charlotte Randall said it was not possible to say whether the boys jumped, fell, or were pushed from the cliff. It was 200 feet down the cliff, and their bodies were found in Eastbourne.
Oh my God, that's awful.
Yeah. So murder-suicide, what would make you want to kill you? I know we've covered it before.
So then he took his own life?
Yeah, he jumped off the cliff with them.
Right. Okay.
Well, he either pushed, I don't know, but he was at the bottom of the cliff with his two boys.
Oh my God. Yeah, I think, like, it's very, very tricky subject, isn't it? Because, again, we don't have a lot of context for this particular case, and it might be one that we pick up and look into in further detail in future, maybe. But very...
60 times, though. That's anger, isn't it? It's hatred.
Yeah. Yeah, but your own children as well.
Yeah.
I just...
And premeditation by drugging them first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad. 7 days later... Now, this is actually a link to a recent case C and Red did with the Salisbury poisonings. Do you remember that case?
Mm-hmm.
So 7 days later, Russian businessman Nikolai Glushkov, who was 68, would be found strangled in his home in the southwest of London. This was a week after the poisonings of former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter in Salisbury. Now, while the killer has never been found, police believe the two incidents to be linked, given the timings, and the fact that Nikolai had himself been poisoned back in 2013, but he had actually survived. So that's an interesting one because I hadn't heard of this before,
No.
really much. But yeah, obviously the police believe they were linked and he was targeted.
It must be so tricky when detectives are trying to establish links or like completely detached links from cases, mustn't it? Like the complexity is in doing something like that just must be so difficult. Like I can't imagine, just an extra layer of, can we just cross-check this and make sure there are no other, whatever's going on at the time, and then it's like the amount of work that has to go into either discounting or corroborating.
Yeah. Now this next case is one I think we definitely might want to look at in detail in the future. So this next case, Rachel, I think is one that we definitely probably want to pick up and do in detail later because it fascinated me and I haven't done it justice, but I couldn't give it obviously the full time here. But yeah, we're staying in March and now we're going to be introduced to a transgender woman called Naomi Hirst, who was 36 years old. She went to meet a man she had been talking to on a swingers website, fabswingers.com, if anyone's interested. And she went to meet Jesse McDonald, who was 25 years old. After several days drinking and taking drugs together, Jesse stabbed Naomi to death with a knife and a broken bottle after drugging her. So he drugged her first so she couldn't fight back. He was living in the hotel that he stabbed her in, so he went and hid in his room once he'd committed the crime while he waited for his 18-year-old girlfriend, Natalia Zarkowski, to arrive to help him clean up and dispose of the body.
Oh my God, so the girlfriend was in on it?
Well, yeah, he texts her. He texts his girlfriend, Natalia, because what had happened, because basically it'd been 4 days in total would have been under drink and drugs binge, and she had been frantically trying to message him to see where he was because she didn't know. So he texted her when to come by, and he said to her that he'd become addicted to a drug that he didn't know, and somehow he had a massive black guy who was dead and a drug dealer on his floor. So that's how he sold it to her. Now, obviously, it was a transgender woman who had been having sex with for days, but he told her it was just a black guy who was dead.
Wow.
Now, she did arrive and helped him clean. And while they were cleaning, he texted his parents to tell them he'd been kept chained up for 4 days and that he'd been drugged and raped. Now, at some point during the cleanup, they couldn't dispose of the body because the police actually found the body.
Oh.
Jesse and his girlfriend were both arrested. He was charged with murder and she was charged with perverting the course of justice. She pled guilty and he pled not guilty, with him sticking by his story that he was the one who had been drugged and raped. Natalia was sentenced to 2 years suspended in prison. Well, 2 years, but suspended, so she never went to prison. 150 hours unpaid work. And Jesse was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 20 years.
Wow.
So, yeah, I think that's what is such an interesting story that I think maybe that's one either me or you should pick up on. I haven't done that justice at all.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, and just conscious by the fact that you said that it might be one that we do pick up on the main show. Like, I'm not going to ask them now because I'd either prefer to hear about it or to, you know, present it myself and kind of answer them. So yeah, we'll stick a pin in that one.
Okay, Grant. So let's skip forward now to May. And I usually try and say at least unbiased at the beginning, but I'm not going to now. I will introduce you to a horrible, vile man, Rachel.
Oh.
Martin Kavanagh, who was 35 at the time, and on the 20th of May, he strangled Sophie Kavanagh, who was 31, and he strangled her in his flat before stripping her and putting her to bed so it looked like she died in her sleep.
Wife, sister?
Well, yeah, the pair had actually been married back in 2011, but they'd split up because he was jealous and possessive and controlling.
Well, sounds like he didn't get over that.
He, however, like you say, he, however, couldn't accept that the relationship was over, and he continued to try to control her in many ways, as he was unable to accept the marriage was over. One of the ways was that he discovered Sophie was using Match.com, a dating website, to try and find a new partner, and so he worked out her password, and he accessed the account, changing details so she'd never get a date.
Oh, God.
And that's just one of many things. In the week leading up to her death, he was bombarding her with messages, and he was offering her £100 if she let him sleep with her one last time. And every time he asked, she refused. 4 days before he killed her, he messaged her saying, "You have broken, shattered, and ripped me to shreds." It's always about them, isn't it? It's always about them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're the victims, aren't they?
I mean, the relationship broke up because of him. It sounded like it was definitely a controlling relationship and probably abusive, but she did this to him, apparently. So the day before the murder, she agreed with him that she'd go to a wildlife park. And, we hear this, but I think it's sometimes just for some peace and quiet, isn't it? Say, yeah, okay, I'll go to this public place with you because it will shut you up messaging me, give you some peace maybe.
And that's the thing, like, absolutely. They're thinking, I know this person. I know that if I just give in to at least one request, then it could calm down for a couple of days. Yeah. And she's probably thinking wildlife park, it's going to be kids, families, other people around. And plus, like, he may have put the charm and affection on where she thought, gosh, maybe, he has changed. Like, a lot of these people coming out of these coercive, controlling relationships, they want so bad for their other half to change and be that person that they fell in love with once upon a time. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. And they had a child together, so she would have wanted maybe to keep some sort of contact for the kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, the wildlife park was the excuse. So he could get her, so he could kill her. He would plead not guilty to murder. Well, they all plead not guilty to murder. I know I may have flippantly said in a previous episode, last one or the one before that, I would not plead not guilty to murder because it's just on the off chance you might get away with it. But it makes you wonder though, because he wouldn't plead not guilty to murder, saying that, listen to his excuse here, saying that he only put his hands around her neck for a maximum of 20 seconds because she was being really aggressive towards him because she'd been taking cocaine and she was attacking him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, that makes me so angry. But can I just say, like, to your point, when it's such a slam dunk case, like, and there's so much evidence towards it being you, like text messages, like, and DNA and all of that. Like, you, by pleading guilty, first of all, you get a reduced sentence, don't you? It's a percentage off your sentence. Yeah. But second of all, you're not putting that family through the absolute pain and suffering of, because I imagine that the court would have had to hear all the accounts of her abuse that she suffered at his hands to build that picture of him, being such an awful, vile, horrible human being, as you put it.
Yeah, exactly. And there was 2 points to that. Firstly, that's why you hear so many times the cases where and they pled guilty on the first day of the trial or the day before the trial, because what usually happens is they plead not guilty, and then just before, when all the evidence is obviously available to everyone, the barrister normally goes, you're gonna get found guilty here. Plead guilty, so you get. I think on the first day of the trial, then it's 5% off or something like that. Plead guilty, so at least you get this time off because you're going to get found guilty. So that's what happened then. But the second part is, and I think he wanted to, because let me read what he wrote something after he killed her. It was revealed in the trial that he wrote on a notice board in his home, and this message, and this kind of alludes to what you were saying, his thinking. So he put this because he was blaming her. You know who you are, so to you I say fuck you, and I really do love you. She deserved it. So yes.
Wow.
He would be found guilty, unsurprisingly and thankfully, and he would be sentenced to life with a minimum term of 15 years. So everyone's probably thinking, Rachel, my word, he's in May. When is this going to end? There were many more murders that took place, including one of a poor woman who was believed to be 50. No one knew her real name apart from the man who killed her because she was his wife. No one had a photo of her, and she was buried under the name Karen because that's what people knew her by, but they knew that wasn't her real name. So her killer, who was found guilty, by the way, never said what her name was or real age or even provided a photograph.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so that was like a little bit depressing. But the last one I want to talk to you about, and I did pick it as a random, which is why there's so many at the beginning of the year. It wasn't by choice. But the last one I want to talk to you about is the murder of heavily pregnant Sana Mohammed, who was 35 and a mother of 5, with one on the way because she was heavily pregnant at the time of her death on the 12th of November 2018. Sana was married in an arranged marriage on her 16th birthday to, now I may get this name wrong, but I don't really care, Ramanoj Umafao Alej Ado.
Let's call him Ram.
Yeah, we'll call him Ram. He was 30 on their wedding day, and it was back in their home country of Mauritius.
Hang on, he was 30 and she was 16?
Yes.
Oh my God.
They both moved to the UK, but in 2012, their relationship broke down after Sana jumped out of a bedroom window, breaking her ankle.
Wow.
Now, she said she did so because Ram had been staring at her while sharpening knives, and she was afraid for her life.
Oh my goodness me.
Yes. In 2013, he was cleared of attacking her, and the judge at the time directed the jury to acquit him on attempted strangulation related to that incident. She did, however...
What a horrible man.
Yeah, she did, however, successfully get a non-molestation order against him, which should have prevented him from going within 100 metres of her home in Ilford. Now, that order was still in place when she died, so obviously it didn't prevent him going within 100 metres of her home. She had three children from that marriage, but she went on to marry again and had another 2 children and was expecting their third. Since their split and divorce, he had been plotting his revenge against her, and he'd spent £500 on 2 crossbows online, which he had stashed near her home, and they were discovered in March of 2018 by a neighbour of Sana's before he could use them. So when they were discovered and he'd lost them, what did he do? He went online to buy 2 more, and he continued the surveillance of her and her house. The crossbows and bolts he bought online didn't require a license, so there wasn't any checks that needed to be done.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, so on the 12th of November, so this was in March. Before March, he stashed the first ones. November when he killed her, so that's 8 months, like, planning and preparation.
That's so bad.
On the 12th of November 2018, he took up position in Sana's shed, armed with 2 crossbows, a knife, duct tape, cable ties, and a hammer.
Oh, jeez.
He was discovered by Sana's husband, who shouted for his wife to run as he was being chased while he was being chased into the house by Ram. When he got into the house, Ram that is, Sana couldn't move easily due to her condition because she was heavily pregnant, and he discovered her on the stairs, going upstairs to hide. He shot her once in the stomach with the crossbow. Yes, causing catastrophic injuries to Sana. Fatal injuries that caused her to die. Now, luckily, It's a strange word to use, but luckily her unborn son was able to be saved, and he was delivered by cesarean section, and he survived and lives to this day. So, well, obviously it's horrible she died. At least they managed to save her son.
Please tell me he was caught.
Yeah, Ram fled after he shot Sana. So he obviously, his defense tried to say because he didn't want to hurt the husband because he was looking after the kids, but like. I don't know why he fled, but he fled after he shot her, but he was arrested at a late stage. When he went to the... You know what I'm going to say here, don't you, Rachel? When he went for the trial for murder of Sana, he pled not guilty. He pled not guilty, yeah. Claiming, this is the worst claim ever, that he shot her by accident, and he didn't mean to.
Well, why did he buy the gun why did he buy the crossbow in the first place?
Why did he have 2 crossbows, duct tape, a hammer, knives, you know? No, I did it by accident, yeah. Why was you hiding in the shed? Well, I don't know. It's all by accident, isn't it?
I didn't realise it was real.
Yeah. He would be sentenced to life in prison, obviously found guilty, with a minimum term of 33 years.
Good.
Yes. It was widely accepted, though, that he couldn't accept how happy Sana was and how much his kids had bonded with her new husband.
Yeah, and
their kids were happy too.
That's 6 children left without a mother as well. And what seems like an absolutely wonderful woman, she sounds like it. And this man gets to live, albeit in prison, see out the rest of his days in prison, but his life continues on. It's just not fair.
And a brave woman who had managed to get out of a arranged, controlling marriage in the first place and start a new life for herself, getting married, have more children. You know, by all accounts, her new husband was like loving and gentle and what you'd expect a partner to be, irrespective of gender. But yeah. So, Rachel, a different episode this time, but I just thought it's the end of the season and it's one that might get people thinking, because we focus on the crime and then we're like, oh, how horrible that is. And we focus on it, so it must be different. But like, it shows you all the murders that happen. And this is in one city in the UK. And I've only covered a few of the murders. There were like babies being killed. I didn't want to cover those, but, you know, babies, old people, all sorts of reasons. So many knife crimes from gangs. So many. And when I was reading... I read like some of the other cases, and so many were just the victim's family saying, "I hope this now helps bring an end to knife crime." That quote, or paraphrasing of that quote, I saw so many times, and obviously it doesn't, because this was 2018, and it's just got worse since then.
I did an episode specifically on, right at the end, like the knife crime statistics across the UK, and it is shocking, but there are so many charities now working towards like ending knife crime, you know, collecting like knives and trying to educate kids in school not to carry knives. You know, it's not cool, it's not some symbol of like what they are on the streets. Like, there's so much going on. You just got to hope that carrying on, chipping away and telling these stories will have an impact on the future generation.
Definitely. And just correct me if I'm wrong here, Rachel, just for those people out there thinking, I don't remember that case. That was on one of our Patreon episodes, wasn't it?
It was, sorry. Yes, it was on Patreon.
So yeah, Rachel, so many different sliding door moments for people that could have prevented them from killing or being killed. Like, for example, Harry, the model, was warned that George was violent and not to engage with him or entertain him. And obviously, his pride.
All it takes is a moment.
Yeah.
That's all. And do you know what? I think so many of us have just faith in humanity that it won't come to something, so violent.
Exactly. So we're off on our 1 week break now. Rachel off to sunny climates and I'm off to play Football Manager. So we're back on the 9th of May with a whopper of a story. And actually, it's definitely my birthday we're back. So feel free to drop me a line saying happy birthday. But Rachel kicks off that season 3, with a bang. And a story suggested by one of our patrons, Ant. So Ant, he suggested it a while ago, but it's finally coming. So until then, please do stay happy, and we'll be back before you know it.
Speak soon, guys. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.